Okay, before we go on, I'm just going to start a new scene. Now, we don't have to close Blender to do this. All I have to do is press Control and N. It's a new file and General. Okay, so we're back to the default setting. By default, Blender has three objects in its scene. It has the cube, it has a lamp, and it has a camera. Now, very, very rarely do I start with the cube, or will I need a cube? So I'm just going to delete this by pressing the delete key. The camera we don't really use, but the times we do use it, we need to set it up and focus it and point it at an object, and the default camera is never in the right position. So once again, I'm going to press delete to delete that. And the lighting, always have to set up lighting for each individual scene. It rarely is this one ever any use to us, so I'm just going to delete that. So that's my scene empty, and you can see in the collection here we've got no objects. Now every time I want to start Blender, I want it to start this way, so I don't have to go around and delete everything. I just open it up and this is it. I can do that here in File, Defaults, Save Startup File. So now, when I close Blender or open a new scene, it'll always come up with the scene. So, for example, if I was to turn this up here and just add a cylinder, this is my scene. If I want to start a new scene, I'll press Control N again, General, I'll discard these changes, and it comes back to my default empty scene. Okay, the way to think about this workspace is it's a big empty universe, and you can do whatever you want in it. You can make something as small as a gemstone or as big as an entire city. It really doesn't matter. The only limitations is you. Okay, so we have several object types in Blender that we can use, and if we go to the Shift A, we'll go through them one by one. First one is a plane. Okay, plane is just a flat face. You will notice that the plane spawned at the center of the grid, but it doesn't spawn at center grid. It actually spawns at the 3D cursor. If I was to delete this plane, this little red and white broken arrow is what's called the 3D cursor. Okay, we can move this about by selecting the 3D cursor tool and clicking somewhere else. And then wherever we add a new object, let's say a plane, it spawns at the 3D cursor. Okay, we can be more accurate with the placement of the 3D cursor rather than just clicking around, because if we click around, you can see there it's way above the grid. Okay, and the way we can be more accurate is by expanding the properties panel. I'll do that with the N key. We've got a cursor selected, and if we go to View, we can change the location of the cursor here. So for example, if I wanted to put it back to the center of the grid, I would change these to 0, 0, 0. And there it is, exactly back at the center of the grid. So if I add another plane here, using the Shift A key, it spawns at the cursor. Okay, let me collapse this panel. So that's our plane. As you can see, it's way below the grid, and I had my cursor tool selected rather than the selection tool. So let me delete this. A quick way to recenter your cursor back to the grid is with Shift C for center. Okay, so let me add a plane. I'm going to move this plane off to the side because I want to look at what object types I've got here. So that's a plane. Okay, I'm going to Shift A and add a cube, which is obviously a little bit different. Shift A, add a circle, which is just the mesh vertices. If I go into edit mode, you'll see it's the vertices and edges with no face. That is a circle. So Let me pull that across. Circles are useful, don't worry, we'll come to that. We can add a UV sphere, which looks a little like a golf ball in that configuration. We can add an icosphere. What's the difference between a UV sphere and an icosphere? Well, let's look at them. UV sphere has square faces. Icosphere has triangular faces. Okay, they're two different types of object. With the UV sphere, the closer to the pole you get, the smaller the faces get. With an icosphere, every face is identical in size. Okay, what else we got? We got a cylinder. We've got a cone. Let me move this. Let's move it this way. We've got a torus, which is like a donut shape. And grid we won't worry about for the moment. But the final one is a monkey. The monkey is quite unique to Blender. Most 3D programs use a teapot as a test object. Blender uses monkey, and she has a name. Her name is Suzanne. If we look here, we can see her name. Okay, so those are, you can think of these apart from this circle. So let me delete this circle, we'll come to that later. You can think of these as the prim types, the equivalent to Second Life prims. And we can build with these prims. So, to explain, let me get my selection tool. Box select all these. All I'm doing is clicking and dragging to select them all, and I can delete them. Let me add a cube. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about scale. How big is this cube? We've got this big empty space, and we've got this grid in this cube. How big is it actually? Is it a centimeter, a meter, a mile? We don't know. Okay. Well, actually, we do know, because in Blender, each grid unit is equal to 1 meter in Second Life. So this cube, if I go, let's say, to side view, we can see that it's 2 grid units wide. So it'll be 2 meters wide. Okay, if we come down to the cube properties here, we can also see, that's the transform, so let's go back to the item tab. We can see that the dimensions of the cube are 2 meters. Okay, so let me collapse this for a minute. We can obviously grab the cube and move it by using the move tool and clicking on the arrows to move it around. We could also grab with the G key. G is a shortcut for grab. So if I press G, I can grab this and move it around. If I want to constrain it to one of these axes, I could say the X axis. I could press X, and now it'll only move along the X axis regardless of where my cursor is. Okay, to release that back to its initial position, I'm just right clicking. The other way to release it, so let me grab it again, would be to press the escape button on your keyboard, and that will release it back to its initial position. Okay, so I can resize this cube. I can scale it with the S key. So if I press S, you'll see we've got this dotted line coming to a double arrow. As I drag my cursor around, it will scale to a size. How to explain, so how do we know what size? Well, once again, if we come back to our properties panel by either clicking this little arrow here or pressing the N key, we're looking at the item. We can see the dimensions that we're scaling to. This is scaled to 4.09. So let me try that again. S, and let me just scale it back into a 4 meter, or actually let's do it a 1 meter cube. Okay, so this can be quite tricky to get accurate. To make this go slower, what you would do is you come closer to your wanted dimension and then press the shift key, and it gives you more control. So I can get exactly 1 meter if I need to. Okay, so say I wanted an arbitrary value of 2.5 meters, I could scale, move my mouse out close to the 2.5, which would be tricky to land on, but if I press my shift key, I've got more control. Okay, and then I can just press my left mouse button to release that. We've got a 2.5 meter cube. Okay, so we can scale it. If we wanted to scale it on just one axis, it'd be the same thing again. We can press S, and let's just say Y, for argument's sake. We can scale it along on the Y axis. So I'm going to scale this to, let's say, 3 meters. So I'm watching my scale here, or the dimensions rather, and I'm going to get it close, press my shift key, 2.99, 3 meters. So I can get accurate dimensions by scaling. Okay. Let's, what else can do? We can rotate by pressing the R key. We can rotate on one axis only, so let's say the Y axis, Y. And if we're watching the angle up here, we can see exactly how far we're rotating. I'm just going to right click to release that. So if I wanted to rotate it, say 32 degrees on a Y, I'll go RY, find the right way, get it close, press the shift button. There we go. Rotated exactly 32 degrees on the Y. Okay. If I was to press RY and then key in 32, it does the same thing. Okay. Let me reset that with Control Z. So we got scale and rotate. This is pretty much the controls we got in Second Life. So technically we could start to prim build in Second Life. So we've got this cube with a dimension of 2.5 by 3 by 2.5. I could add another cube, Shift A, Mesh Cube. Now we'll see we've got an operator panel down here. If we expand this, it will give us some operations where we can locate it to. So for example, I can slide it along on the Y, and I can go negative numbers on the Y. Okay. Rotation, so if I was to match that 32 degrees on the Y, it'll rotate. And what else? Generate UVs. Leave this checked for now. This is very handy when you're beginning. We can align to the world axis or the view, so it's looking directly at us. Align to 3D cursor. Okay, we'll leave this on the world axis. Now, as soon as I go to edit this cube, these options will disappear. They're gone forever. You can only get these options when you first create an object. So if I tab into edit mode, it's gone. Okay, if I tab back into object mode, it's still gone. Right. So we can start to place things, add things together, and start to build like we do with prims.